Noon arrived, and the female employees all stood up at once and headed to the break room in a group. Some of them had their purses and cell phones, ready to go out for lunch. Most of the men preferred eating out. Watching almost everyone leave, I took my lunch box out of my bag and opened the lid. That's when Sam peeked over my shoulder from behind.
"John, you brought that cheap-looking lunch again?"
He always ate out, but he probably delayed his departure just to tease me. When he came back from lunch, he'd always boast loudly, "I ate at this famous French restaurant that was in a magazine," or "the midday set meal at the traditional restaurant was amazing." He always flaunted his wealth, being a college grad from a rich family, and has been looking down on me, a high school grad from a poor background, ever since we started working. I lost my parents in an accident when I was in elementary school, and my grandma raised me ever since. She had her own business, so we got by, but I didn't get new stuff like other kids, nor could we afford luxuries. Being made fun of for being poor was a regular occurrence, but my grandma would always cook my favorite meals.
Eating delicious food can make you forget your sorrows.
She'd say,
It'll make you want to keep going the next day.
whenever I had her meals and talked with her, my spirits were lifted. Her meals are what kept me going. So, when Sam mocked the lunch box my grandma poured her heart into, I couldn't stand it. I retaliated with, "This is a homemade lunch my grandma made for me. Don't make fun of it. And why does it matter to you what lunch I bring?" Even though we started working here at the same time, I always used formal language with him since he had a higher educational background. Predictably, he kept teasing,
"Looks like something an old lady would make. The colors are all off, and everything's just brown. The whole office smells like stew now because of you. Think of your colleagues who have to work here."
No one else ever complained about eating lunch at the desk. Even our manager brings his own lunch box made by his wife. It was clear he was just bullying me. The best way to deal with people like him is to ignore them. Responding just encourages them or makes them more aggressive. No matter how much he ridiculed my lunch, I shouldn't react. So, I ignored him and began eating. After some more taunting, he realized he was running out of lunch time and left with an annoyed click of his tongue. It's baffling that even as adults, some people still behave like schoolyard bullies. These people probably won't ever change. Then one day, during lunch, Sam approached me.
"John, I feel bad seeing you eat that awful lunch every day. Let me treat you to lunch today."
I wondered what got into him, but I politely declined. "I appreciate the offer, but I have this." Before I could finish, he grabbed my lunchbox wrapped in a cloth. He then unwrapped it and opened the lid, exclaiming,
"Yuck, this lunch smells like trash. Not even worth eating."
To my shock, he dumped the contents into a nearby trash can. Of course, the contents began to fall out, bit by bit. What the? Stunned and at a loss for words, I watched as he said,
"Now you have no reason to say no. I'll take you to a top-tier Western restaurant today, 100 times better than that lunch."
I was seething with anger. "Sam, what have you done? You're going to pay for this," I said in a deep, resonant voice. Noticing the change in my demeanor, a confused Sam said, "What?" Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind.
"Excuse me, John. Did you bring the lunchbox I asked for?"
I turned around to see Mr. Sounder, the CEO of our company's biggest client.
"Mr. Sounder? Why are you here?"
He was freaked out by the unexpected situation and shouted out in a cracked voice. Noticing the lunchbox in Sam's hand and the discarded contents in the trash, Mr. Sounder looked astounded and asked,
"What's going on here?"
I sincerely apologized to Mr. Sounder. I'm terribly sorry. The truth is, my grandma packed a lunch for you with some of your favorite deli dishes, but I am unable to deliver it to you anymore. My grandma owns a deli, and Mr. Sounder was a regular there. Since he moved away, he hadn't been able to visit the deli as often. So, knowing that I had a meeting with our CEO today, he'd asked me to bring him a lunch box. Mr. Sounder's gaze was fixed on the food in the trash can.
"Who threw this away?"
Though he phrased it as a question, his tone was confident. Sam visibly flinched.
It was me.
He replied with a disappearing voice, his face pale as though he might faint at any moment.
"What gave you the right to throw away someone else's lunch? How could you do something so terrible?"
Mr. Sounder's voice of anger echoed throughout the office. The manager, who was enjoying his wife's packed lunch, rushed over and immediately apologized to Mr. Sounder.
"I deeply apologize for our employees' behavior."
Even though he didn't fully understand the situation, he knew better than to upset an important client. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, Sam also apologized with the manager.
I'm so sorry. I'll buy you a comparable lunch right away.
However, this only deepened the frown on Mr. Sounder's face.
"You don't get it. Do you know why I specifically asked him to bring me that lunchbox? It was filled with dishes his grandma made with love. If I wanted a store-bought lunch, I would have gotten one myself."
At a loss for words, Sam began to cry. But Mr. Sounder coldly responded,
"You should be apologizing to John and his grandma, not me. It's quite unsettling to think that we have such an irresponsible employee."
I pulled out another lunchbox from my bag and handed it to him. I'm not sure if it has your favorite deli dishes, but this is a homemade lunchbox my grandma packed for me. Would you accept this one instead? He was taken aback.
"But isn't this your lunch?"
I nodded reassuringly. It's okay. I'll just have Sam treat me to lunch today. This time, it was Sam's turn to be surprised. Holding the lunchbox I gave him, Mr. Sounder said, "For John's sake, I won't mention this again. But you, young man, need to seriously reflect on your actions." He then left for his meeting with our CEO. After getting permission from the manager to go out for lunch, Sam and I left the office. Sam took me to a fancy Western restaurant, a place I normally wouldn't go. The burgers alone were over $20. It's nice to dine out once in a while, I said, then he sincerely apologized.
John, I truly apologize.
He then shared his story of why he had thrown the lunch away. His parents were well off, however, they were always busy. Whenever there were school events that required students to bring lunch, his mom would order gourmet lunch box from high-end restaurants.
While everyone else was enjoying homemade lunches with their families, I was eating alone, and it was lonely.
As he progressed through high school and college, fewer and fewer classmates brought packed lunches, so he didn't really feel self-conscious about it anymore.
But when I found out that you brought a homemade lunch to work, and it was obviously a very elaborate homemade lunch, I was jealous.
Out of jealousy, he had tried to mock me for being a high school graduate and being less wealthy, and when that didn't work, he lashed out.
I wanted to prove that a restaurant lunch was better than your homemade one. Now I realize how wrong I was. No matter how much I apologize, it won't make up for it.
He sobbed. It was eye-opening. I always envied his privileged background, never knowing the loneliness he felt. If you promise not to harass me anymore, I won't take any action against you for what you did. Tears streaming down his face, he vowed never to mistreat me again. The next day, I handed him a lunchbox. My grandma heard about what happened and wanted you to have this. He was in shock and asked,
Is it okay?
She wants you to have it. With that said, he responded, thank you, and accepted it. From then on, things changed. Sam was transferred to the customer service department. It was a decision made by the upper management based on the report from the manager. He solemnly received the transfer notice and replied, I'll work with a renewed spirit and dedication. Although Sam and I are in different departments now, I see him almost every day. That's because, ever since that day, my grandma started packing an extra lunch for him. The day after I first handed him the lunchbox, he visited my grandma's deli.
Eating the lunch made with so much love, I realized the foolishness of my actions. I'm truly sorry.
My dear, I'll make you lunch every day from now on. Make sure you eat up.
She assured him. Feeling indebted to her, he started frequenting the deli and soon became a regular. Just the other day, Sam bumped into Mr. Sounder at the deli. Seeing his discomfort, my grandma praised him to Mr. Sounder.
This young man has truly turned over a new leaf. All thanks to you, Mr. Sounder.
Hearing this, Mr. Sounder smiled and said,
Eating food made with so much love, it's hard for anyone to stay mad.
He then patted Sam on the shoulder and said,
Keep up the good work.
Sam nodded vigorously and replied with a strong yes. On weekends, Sam started helping out at my grandma's store, becoming like another grandson to her.
I did wrong.
He confessed,
but I'm grateful for this chance to connect with John and others because of it.
The mischievous look he once had was now gone, as if a weight had been lifted from him. Me too, I added. Any tension between us vanished, and he became one of my best friends. After 2 years in customer service, it was announced in April that Sam would be returning to my department. I'm sure we'll become great work buddies,